Holiday in the United States commemorating the adoption of the Declaration of Independence 241 years ago on July 4th, 1776. The Continental Congress declared that the 13 American colonies regarded themselves as a new nation, the United States of America, and were no longer part of the British Empire. I'm going to read the first two paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And by men, I mean people. They didn't know it, but they meant that too. Independence Day, for some Christians, is an important commemoration of the significance of the American experiment in governance and faith, and a reminder of the centrality of the condition of the human soul to that experiment's continuance. This can be a day of real spiritual reflection, work, and repentance. Repentance is the hallmark of serious Christian endeavor, as well as celebration and rededication. I have a reading from Ecclesiastes about governing. Ecclesiastes is one of the wisdom writings in the Old Testament. The writer of Ecclesiastes is identified simply as the teacher, despite some passages that suggest a king as the author. The tradition was that it was Solomon. It is best to stay with this designation, ascribing the book to teacher. That is one steeped in Israel's wisdom traditions, preparing a lesson for people who needed to hear what that wisdom had to say to their own lives. While a few scholars would date the book in the 5th or 4th century BCE, the consensus of contemporary scholarship understands it to have been written in Jerusalem around 250 BCE, before the current era, in which situation it fits well. Ecclesiastes offers honest reflections on the human quest for meaning, on the realities of life on this earth and under God, avoiding pious cliches, and advising the enjoyment of the gifts God gives. So this is Ecclesiastes chapter 10. A wise magistrate educates his people, and the rule of an intelligent person is well ordered. As the people's judge is, so are his officials. As the ruler of the city is, so are all its inhabitants. An undisciplined king ruins his people, but a city becomes fit to live in through the understanding of its rulers. The government of the earth is in the hand of the Lord, and over it he will raise up the right leader for the time. Human success is in the hand of the Lord, and it is he who confers honor upon the lawgiver. Do not get angry with your neighbor for every injury, and do not resort to acts of insolence. Arrogance is hateful to the Lord and to mortals, and injustice is outrageous to both. Sovereignty passes from nation to nation on account of injustice and insolence and wealth. The beginning of human pride is to forsake the Lord. The heart has withdrawn from its maker. For the beginning of pride is sin, and the one who clings to it pours out abominations. Therefore the Lord brings upon them unheard of calamities and destroys them completely. The Lord overthrows the thrones of rulers and enthrones the lowly in their place. The Lord plucks up the roots of the nations and plants the humble in their place. The Lord lays waste the lands of the nations and destroys them to the foundations of the earth. He removes some of them and destroys them and erases the memory of them from the earth. Pride was not created for human beings, or violent anger for those born of women. Whew, that's a lot. And it's a little bit of fire and brimstone too, right? Well, in Unity, we often interpret Bible passages as metaphysically, meaning beyond the exact written scientific word, metaphysically beyond the physical, as if it was you. Like if this is a metaphor for you, but I'm also saying this is a wisdom writing which has some wisdom for us. One scholar said, "What an extraordinary indictment of our current era, the attitude of our current eras toward money, greed, power, pride, and short-sighted partisanship." Okay, partisanship. We do know we are at a time when people disagree, and we can look at this passage as a message to us personally, and I'd always advise that. We can also look at a message from rulers, from a wisdom teaching from a long time ago. The person who wrote that was probably also talking about their situation. I am going to ask all of us to contemplate the spiritual significance of this reading, and I'm going to go over a few points. If you want to look it up, it's Ecclesiastes 10, 1 to 8, 10 to 12, and 12 to 8, or 1 to 8, and then 12 to 18. So basically 1 to 18, you could read that if it's something you want to get to. Thinking of these statements and applying them to our own selves, like to own them, which is really how we want to do it. Let's go with this. The beginning of human pride is to forsake the Lord. The heart has withdrawn from its maker. Well, when the pride in us forsakes the Lord, the maker, our higher self, the Lord is always our higher self in us, the maker, our creator, our loving, true self. The kind of, not the pride where you're proud of yourself for doing something good. It's the kind of pride where you're better than anyone else. That's what we're talking about here. That's what I'm interpreting. Whenever you think you're better than anyone else, that's actually a false pride. It's a reaction. It's always a reaction. I know it. I have it. We all have it. When I have a feeling of fierce pride that I'm better than anyone else, it's because deep down inside I have a fear and a thought that I am actually unworthy and not as good as. So anytime you start thinking that you're better than anyone else, that is a clue. That is a clue. The beginning of human pride is to forsake the Lord. That means I'm forsaking my higher self. So that's my interpretation. I offer that to you. Metaphysically, we can apply this to our own self. I think about little ways. You know, I don't generally go around thinking that people are worse than me. But it's a subtle thing, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I can get extremely angry to faceless people in cars. And you know what? It's actually harmful to me. Every time I say, "You stupid driver," I might as well be, "You stupid driver." It actually is harmful to me. That's a simple example, and I know that we all have it, but any time that I let that pride, which is just hiding an insecurity or a fear. Truly, when I get mad at somebody on the road, it's because I'm afraid they're going to hurt me. I mean, if I really trace it down to the depth of my being, it's not because I think they're driving stupidly. It's because I think they're going to crash, or I'm going to crash, or they're going to hurt me somehow. It's not like I'm the Olympic judge of driving. Well, that was a 5.3 on that turn. It's not like that. It's a reaction. Anytime I think, you stupid driver, somehow you've come into my sphere and I don't like what you're doing. I think you're going to hurt me. So I want to stop that, because I don't want that human pride. I do not want to forsake the Lord. I don't want to forsake my higher self. It's so much nicer to walk and feel connected to the loving part of me. It's just way easier. For the beginning of pride is sin, and the one who clings to it pours out abominations. Therefore, the Lord brings upon them unheard of calamities and destroys them completely. The Lord overthrows the thrones of rulers and enthrones the lowly in their place. Wow, that's the fire and brimstone part, right? Like, if you do it wrong, the Lord is going to pluck you up and throw you out. I would say that a more helpful way of looking at that is to take it in. Is this something I own? Is there, and look about where in your life, and let's face it, we have plenty of examples. Is there somebody you would like to overthrow anywhere? And I'm not just talking politically, Maybe you want to overthrow your boss. Maybe you want to overthrow the sister who's always in charge of the family reunion. Right? Isn't there somebody you want to overthrow? How can we own it? How can we disarm it? How can we get back into independence? That's the question. So I'm throwing the question out for you to ask yourself. There's one last quote I wanted to talk about. Pride was not created for human beings, or violent anger for those born of women. That's flat out radical spiritual advice. Okay? It's just radical spiritual advice. Don't be proud. Don't have violent anger. It's not of our nature. It's not our higher nature. It just says don't do it. The idea I want to take from this is that our spiritual nature is awesome and wonderful and grand and all the highest things. When we picture the founding people of the country, we at least, when we were children, we had a little vision of grand, wonderful people. And there are still grand, wonderful people in all aspects of history, including our country and our lives. You know who they are to you. There are grand, wonderful people. So that is who you are. That is who I am and who you are. I have one more idea to talk about today. It's the idea of spiritual independence. I got this from a ministry called the Lasting Supper. The idea of spiritual independence, which I think is a beautiful idea. This is the manifesto. I am free. I always have been. I always will be. I have the right to ask questions as a way to become wise. It is my right and responsibility to find and walk my own spiritual path. Can I get a woohoo for that? I just like it. It is my right and responsibility to find and walk my own spiritual path. That is unity to me. It is my duty to myself and others to remove the log from my own eye first. It's just so good. I can take care of myself before I care about labels or what others call me. It is necessary for me to be true to myself before being true to a group, I recognize my roots, but I will not allow them to prevent me from changing. I embrace my unique spirituality and will let my light shine for others. I take charge of my life and will live it wisely, compassionately, and joyfully. I am spiritually independent. So I just ask you to say that with me, okay? I am spiritually independent. Let's take an offering for unity.